So how's it going?
Good, nice to meet you.
Yeah, where are you joining us from anyway?
I'm actually in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, and I gotta ask, I did a little bit of like research, right, about Michaela Kiersch, and your application video for American Ninja Warrior came
Yeah.
up. Had to ask about that.
So that was in I think 2016 when I did Ninja Warrior, and the producers actually like reached out to me. They
Oh
were
yeah.
looking for more climbers to get involved. They're like, please just throw together like a little video and audition, and that. So I did, and I got on the show, and I did the whole thing, and I went to Vegas, and
Oh,
I
you
haven't
did.
I haven't done it again since because it wasn't really. It's not my passion, and there's a lot
Yeah,
of people who are really passionate about it, which is so cool, but it wasn't for me.
right. Did you like trade for it, or was it just like so transferable from climbing?
Not really. I did go to a ninja gym one day just to like see
Yeah.
what it was about. I felt very unprepared. I probably could have used a little bit more training, but yeah, I just went in off the couch basically and
Cool.
just tried my best.
Nice. Yeah, because climbers have had really good success, like Megan Martin and Canada's own Sean McCall has been on there a bunch. Did you
Yeah.
like, how did you do? I
Um,
actually haven't,
I made it to Vegas as like a dark horse.
okay.
So you do the qualifying round, and some people actually qualify, and then some people, like me, do well enough that they want to give you like a second chance, kind of.
Oh, okay.
And that's how I ended up going to like the Vegas final, but I did not do very well in the final. So yeah.
So obviously you were just in Europe, right? And your trip started with a Petzl Rock trip in Mckayla, Greece. And you were climbing alongside some legends like Dave Graham, Conrad Anker, Sasha DeJulian, Neil Gresham, Steve McClure, Margot Hayes. The list could go on and on, right? And I'm kind of curious about these Pretzel Rock trips because like they're well known for their like local tourism and climbing development, but they also have a bit of a they're also well known for their like nighttime festivities. And I even saw that Dave Graham was DJing at the Petzl Rock trip. And I'm kind of curious if you could give some insight into like a pro climber group, like a pro climbing group like that, because I'm curious if you guys were like cutting loose at night or if you were all very focused on like recovery for the next day.
This was actually my first Petzl Rock trip, which I was really excited to take part and, be part of the fun. And I would say definitely we had like these assignments within each of our little teams where we had to make these videos, which maybe you've seen
Hmm.
on
I
YouTube.
did see that, yeah.
And those were really long filming days because we had to get so much packed in. And each team had their own house that we were staying in. So the nightlife during the filming portion was pretty chill. Like we would just meet up at the restaurant and eat and go to bed. But there's like always this like huge blowout after party, and that's where Dave DJ'd. And I would say it's like maybe 50-50, the people who like go out and rage and the people who like go home and sleep in that
Okay.
crowd. Like any crowd, it's like
Yeah.
they're all characters, they're all so different and unique, but it was so fun to be back in a trip like that in a group setting because it's been so many years, I feel like. So
Oh, true. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I watched your video, it's goat time or whatever. That was awesome.
yeah,
Um,
that was cool.
what were some of your favorite moments from that rock trip?
I think definitely being in the smaller village, we got to see a more authentic traditional side of Greece, which was really cool. And we interacted with the local community a bunch. So for me, the highlight was milking the goats and meeting the farmer and like eating the goat cheese that came from the goats that we were milking and seeing his
Wow.
cellar and just all his stash of crazy stuff that he made, like jam and liquors and things like that was very cool.
Yeah, I did a trip to Kalymnos like quite a few years ago, and that was one of my favorite things too, was like the food there is so good. Yeah.
Yeah, we ate so much Greek salad. I think I had a Greek salad every day for 2 weeks.
Did you like have any good takeaways? Like, did you learn anything from all these like special like this huge group of specialized climbers?
So one of the cool things about the rock trip this time is that we were put into these smaller teams that we spent pretty much all day, every day with. And my
Oh,
team
okay.
was like Alex Magos, Martina Demel, Anak Verhoeven, and Tina Jonsson Hafsas. And Tina and I have spent a lot of time together over the years, but the other members of my team I didn't really know that well. So I think like the coolest part was just getting to know a new group of people that maybe I've heard of, or like, you know, they're on the
Hmm.
same team with some of my sponsors like Petzl, but just being able to like really get closer and make new friends was the best part.
Cool. I actually want to stick on that topic of like climbing and partnerships within climbing. But your next stop was in Magic Wood in Switzerland, which you were on an absolute tear. You did like 16 boulders from V10 to V30 or V14, sorry, in just 3 weeks. Like that's amazing. I think the easiest boulders on that list would be like a lifelong dream for me. Yeah, and you were there with Alex Puccio and Nina Williams, as far as I could tell from your Instagram. And yeah, talking about climbing and partnerships, you have this really cool past with some of your hardest climbs where you're like trading sends with these other really strong athletes. For example, on Tigris Sit, you and Alex both sent, and then of course on Dreamcatcher and on Necessary Evil, you and Paige Klassen both sent those as well. So I'm kind of wondering, like, can you talk about the importance of having like a good partner when you're like trying these routes that are like at your limit?
Yeah, so definitely in Magic Wood going with Nina and Alex was a dream. I've been friends with them for years and years, like over 10 years. So it's really cool to be able to climb on boulders with them and get different insight, different beta, and just have like a support system on the ground while you're trying to figure it out and at home, planning rest days, things like that. I think definitely climbing is an individual sport, but having like a team is really important, at least to my success. I thrive in that environment. And climbing with Paige, believe it or not, was just like coincidence both
Oh,
times that we were at Necessary Evil and Dreamcatcher. And for whatever reason, we ended up like resting when the other one was climbing. So we didn't get to like trade burns that much on either of those routes, but it was fun. I was actually there when she set. So it was like fun to just be there to witness it and see her style is so different from mine. But we both obviously made it to the top. And it's really cool to have to be surrounded by other strong women when we're pushing our limits on these climbs.
yeah, totally. Actually, one of our staff questions was if it was a coincidence that you and Paige were at Dreamcatcher at the same time. So
Yeah,
you've
totally.
already
But
got that one.
we joked about it like, where are you going next? Because this is working for us.
Yeah, yeah, nice. Did you guys hash anything out?
I mean, she now she's pregnant. She's due
Right.
a minute, it feels like. So that's her next adventure.
Do you find that like sometimes it's not helpful to have like someone else working the same route as you?
For the most part, I like the camaraderie. I like the support. I think as long as everyone is like cool and respectful and happy, then it's no problem. I think I do like pick up on vibes a little bit when I'm climbing. So if there's like a lot of negativity, sometimes I absorb that, but that's more of a me problem.
Back to Magic Wood. You're obviously climbing with Nina Williams, like I mentioned before, and she kind of specializes in like highball bouldering, and also sometimes pushes herself on like the big walls in Yosemite, for example. I was kind of wondering, like, where do you draw the line in terms of risk, and is Nina kind of pushing you to get on those tall boulders, or do you have any plans to go out big wall climbing or anything like that?
Nina and I have a really playful friendship, and we like go back so far. We're really close and trust each other a lot. So she definitely does like to try and push me outside of my comfort zone and get me to take bigger risks on taller things. It's it's a work in progress. Sometimes I let her influence me, but sometimes I don't. I think it just depends in the moment what I'm comfortable with, like
Mm.
how strong I feel. And like for example, this trip she did this really beautiful highball V6 called Flatlander, but it was just way too scary for me.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, I'm just as happy watching her do it as I would be doing it myself. So I live vicariously.
Is there like a hard line that you draw? Like, is it like, oh, it's like over 10 feet, like I'm not gonna do it, or it's like
No.
over 10 feet and it's like X grade? No, it's just.
I think you have to consider each climb differently. Grades are always subjective. Sometimes
Mhm.
height comes into play in the grading, sometimes not. So I think about it in the moment, and if it doesn't feel right, I don't do it. It's just
Yeah,
not
fair enough.
a risk for me. I don't have the mindset that Nina has. Like she is really in control of her fear, but I am more of a scaredy cat. So
Oh. She must have some good tips though, I would imagine.
yeah, she does. And like we've been practicing, especially when the Seco block comps were happening, you know, the
Right.
solo, it's really scary for me. So we were doing some, she was coaching me, but yeah.
I imagine those Seco blocks are pretty sketch. Like you're up there.
Yeah.
Nice. And then how about the multi-pitching? Do you have any like trad goals or anything like that?
I don't have any like immediate goals that come to mind, but it's definitely something that I'd love to get more experience in and branch out. Because mainly I've stuck to bouldering and sport climbing, but I'm always open to expand and try new things. So
Speaking of trying to expand, I kind of want to ask you about like goal setting. Like I said earlier, you did like all those crazy boulders from V10 to V14. And then two of those boulders were your second and your third V14s, with your first one happening back earlier this spring with this end of hailstorm in Utah. Then you also did like your 10th 14C Apex Predator, is that right?
I don't know if I would have to count.
Yeah, okay.
But
We'll
somewhere
say we'll say like 8 or 10 or something. Um, and then, of course, you did Dreamcatcher back in September. 8A.NU, I don't know if you know this, but they actually reported that you're the only woman to climb V14 and 14D within the last year.
that's pretty cool.
I was kind of wondering if you can talk about like goal setting. Because for me, I find like sometimes I can get a little overstoker and like um, bite off more than I can chew, let's say, and then I get halfway through a trip and I'm barely ticked off anything. So I'm kind of wondering, like, did you like have this huge list over this past year, or even just for the trip in Magic Wood, or how did you approach that?
But Dreamcatcher was always on the list. Like I feel like that one should go on everybody's list no matter what. I had been to Squamish before, and I sort of like what you were experiencing, just getting so psyched to try everything. I definitely had that experience, especially with boulders. So it was easier to come back a second time and be like a little bit more focused on one objective. As far as Magic Wood, because I had just finished school, I wasn't really sure where my level was in bouldering. So I didn't really set any concrete goals. I like knew I wanted to try New Baseline and then also Riverbed and Steppenwolf. Those were my top three, but just try to see if I could maybe do one of them, like shop around. I wanted to keep it pretty open because it's hard to set like a high expectation and then not meet it and feel kind of stuck, especially in a new area. So yeah, I went in relatively open.
Did you feel like that kind of helped like reduce the pressure for the trip?
Definitely. Just having no idea how well I was going to climb was like no pressure at all. I was with my friends. I felt really safe and supported. So I was able to just go and try my hardest every day.
Back to goal setting, like how do you like do you have, well, you obviously said you had like a lifelong goal of doing Dreamcatcher, but are you kind of the type of person who has like trip goals and like 1 year goals and like 5 year goals and like lifelong goals, or how do you kind of break down your climbing goals?
I keep them all in my head. There's something that's a little bit intimidating about writing goals down or like saying them out loud because with that, I feel like comes a lot of accountability. Then you have to try and actually achieve that goal, which is scary sometimes. So I have lots of different things floating, and a lot of it comes down to timing. Like, where can I go this year? Am I in sport climbing shape or am I in bouldering shape? But I think the way that I pick climbs is something that would be challenging. So it's not necessarily about the grade, but for me, it does end up being in some of those higher grades. But I really like the beautiful climbs, the aesthetic ones, like historical climbs I gravitate towards a lot. So I think there's just a lot of factors that goes into it. I don't have
Yeah.
like the exact recipe.
Yeah, I think it's great that you do those like historical climbs. Like, yeah, Dreamcatcher, obviously very historic, but so is Necessary Evil for first 14C in America, and then you even did Super Tweak and with Boon Speed on Belay, which is like so sick.
It was
Yeah,
really cool. He did it the year that I was born, which also felt
wow.
like very full circle.
Was he like giving you beta, or like how did that relationship even start?
He lives here, so I see him around in the gym. We're friends. But he like couldn't even remember how to get to it. It was a lot of
Well,
fun.
back around that same time in 2017 when you graduated from your undergrad, you were like breaking into that 14 plus range with the Golden Ticket, 50 words for pump, Southern Smoke, 24 carats. Like that's a huge list already.
Those Red River Gorge climbs.
Yeah, yeah, that's your kind of your specialty, or it was kind of your specialty, hey? But
Base.
yeah, yeah, right. But then you also did your first V13 around that time with the Send of Crown of Aragon and Waco Tanks, and then Necessary Evil, like we talked about as well. That was in early 2018, but around the same time. Now you're on a tear with all your Sons of Magic Wood and Utah, fresh after graduating from your doctorate. Is graduating like related to like hard climbing or something? Like should people just go back to school if they want to try and sand hard or something?
I'm like thinking about going for an MBA just so I could get to the next level. No,
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just having more time and more freedom. Like in school, I prioritize school,
Hmm.
and it's hard to like take a lot of trips to go anywhere for an extended amount of time. And sometimes you just need more days to push your limit. Like the weekend trips are not conducive to getting to that next level. So I think like Magic Wood, I was there for 3 weeks. I was in Greece for 2 weeks, and that's not something that I would have had the opportunity to do if I was still in school. So I think that plays a big part in it. And especially now, without, I don't have a plan to return to school. I don't have a plan to get a full time job. Like I just have this sort of new freedom with my climbing that I haven't had pretty much ever in my entire life. So I'm excited to see where it takes me, how it goes.
On that topic, I read I think it was in Climbing Magazine that when you graduate from your undergrad, you're experiencing like some agitation with like all this like free time that you have. Are you feeling that, or have you kind of learned that lesson already, or how's that going?
I feel good. I feel like I've learned so much more since then, and my climbing is a little bit more focused. I feel like I know how to train and where I want to go. And with undergrad, it felt like I had just like this year and a half before I had to go to grad school again. So I think that created a lot of that anxiety, that frantic energy. Like, what should I do? I only have a year and a half. Where now I can be a little bit more patient.
So you don't have plans to like start working full time as an occupational therapist? Or...
I will do some part-time work, but I'm not going to accept a full-time position right now.
We have staff questions. I like reached out to the staff of Climb On, and I was kind of and
Cool.
yeah, I got a list of questions. But one of them was wondering if your experience in academia has helped you in climbing.
I think not directly, but having a space separate from climbing really improves my mental health and just my quality of life in general. I like having friends that don't climb, that have no idea what I'm doing. They don't really understand the grades. We talk about other things, other topics in life, and I really value having that space. So I think in that way, it's helped my climbing. I can
Right.
I can separate a little more.
Like if it's all climbing all the time, like you kind of get bogged down by that like singular focus.
I think it's a lot of pressure when everything in your life centers around climbing. Like when it's
Totally.
your friends and your free time and your work and your training and your hobbies. You know, if you're not good at climbing, then you're not good at anything in your life, or you're
Hmm.
not satisfied in that way. So having like a separate space, a separate outlet is really beneficial for me, I've
Hmm.
learned.
Do you have any other like sports that you do besides climbing?
No, I used to play baseball when I was little, like really little, up until I was 9 or 10. But other than that, I switched to just climbing.
I was wondering if you can kind of explain like what a doctorate in occupational therapy is, just briefly for people that may not know, like
Yeah,
myself.
so yeah, I get this a lot.
Yeah.
Occupational therapy is probably most similar to physical therapy, but the focus of occupational therapy is like everyday activities. So being able to like put on your shirt or write your name or cook, and it's very all encompassing. It includes like cognitive function, like sequencing, memory, executive functioning, like decision making, but it's also like very physical, like the ability to hold a pencil or something like that. So I decided to get into occupational therapy because my mom, when she was sick, worked with occupational therapists. And from there, I learned that occupational therapists can specialize in hand therapy because your hands are so crucial to everyday activities. So I'm specializing in hand therapy. I hope to work with climbers. Yeah.
I don't know. Could you like give an example of like
Yeah. So let's say that an individual has a stroke and loses function in like the left side of their body. You would see an occupational therapist to be able to put your shirt on again without being able to use your
hmm,
left arm, for example. Or like, cooking a meal, or someone who has maybe Parkinson's, being able to walk, someone with MS, things like that. But it's also like post-operative stuff, people who maybe have like surgical precautions when they go home from like hip surgery, knee surgery, mastectomies, and need to like relearn how to get dressed following those precautions, or how to take a shower and take care of their wounds. And then for the hands, like it could be post-surgical stuff like tendon transfers, or people who've like maybe lacerated their fingers like while cooking, something like that. You do a lot of rehab in that way as well.
Tendon transfers. Do you ever see that in climbers, or is that like a thing? No.
So I've actually only seen a couple, and the most recent was for a patient who had cerebral palsy, and they'll like take a tendon from the flexor side and put it onto the extensor side, basically. So you're using your flexor to like extend your wrist back, that kind of a thing.
Right. So I can't like win the lottery and then like buy a pro climber's tendons and like get them put into my forearm.
It's usually your own tendons. So you're not trading up.
Damn. You are well known for like being very diligent in like your scheduling while you were in school, and then making time for coaching youth and making time for going 7 hours to the red like all the time, every weekend basically. I was lucky enough to do a diploma in school where I basically got credits for rock climbing, so I never really had to experience climb or school taking away my time from climbing. But my partner did an undergrad in chemical biology, and I imagine it's similar to your undergrad, which was bioscience. Yeah, and she was like crammed with schoolwork, you know, like she was always in the library, she was always in the lab. She couldn't imagine like driving 7 hours on the weekend to go to her project, or like she couldn't even get to the gym half the time to train. So I was wondering like how you were kind of able to like manage your time.
I think definitely my ability to balance climbing and school fluctuated a lot depending on like where I was at in the semester, what my course load looked like. So I learned to just be really patient with myself in my climbing. Some weeks I didn't climb at all. And some weeks I could get to the gym 4 days a week, you know, or go to the red on the weekends. But it was definitely a lot of up and down. It wasn't consistent by any means. And I know it seems sometimes on social media like it was seamless for me, but it wasn't. It was really hard. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the key for me was just like establishing like a schedule in the beginning of the week that was more like a goal. Like I want to climb on Monday for an hour and a half, and I want to do homework for, 2 hours on Sunday, whatever it is, and being really realistic with that. And I built in like free space, like a couple hours throughout the week of just time where I didn't have to do anything, which was key for me to just have time to like sit and stare at a wall if I wanted to, and not feel like I had to go, go, go. And the other important trick is to just like follow the schedule pretty diligently, because as soon as you deviate or like skip a session or something like that, it kind of sets the precedent and throws you off for the rest of the week.
Yeah, I imagine you must have felt like a lot of pressure as like a pro climber while you were in school to like not let your climbing like fall behind. Like even recreational climbers, I think find like, oh, if I'm not climbing 4 days a week, like I'm not gonna get better, or, like whatever. But like I think you're someone that they can look up to, right? Like you were only climbing a couple hours a week in the gym, you said, and then like getting out to your project on the weekends, and obviously you're still like progressing like crazy. So that's really cool.
Oh, thank you. I think, yeah, it's all about being patient with yourself and readjusting based on like what's in front of you. If you want to prioritize climbing, then you have to understand that maybe you're not going to get the best grades in school, or, that kind of a thing. So it's different for every individual, but
Yeah, and I'd love to pick your brain about training because like I'm a fan of like fingerboarding, and I have some like go-to workouts that I try and squeeze in a couple times a week. Um, but I find it difficult as like a self-coach climber to like identify my weaknesses. So I was wondering if you could talk about some of your weaknesses and like how you identify those and what you do to work on them.
I would say just as a generally smaller climber, my weaknesses tend to be any moves where I'm really spread out or they're dynamic. So I put in a lot of time and effort into improving on those skills. A lot of jumpy moonboard problems. For Dreamcatcher, for example, there's lots of like big moves to the side. So I was training that relatively specifically before coming out to try that route. But yeah, I think it's also important to keep it balanced within a session. If you're constantly training your weaknesses, it can be like really exhausting and draining mentally. I think it's important to have success every day in your climbing. It doesn't have to be all the time, otherwise you won't improve. But climbing on a few boulders or routes that are your style, I think is like really good for the mental health.
But yeah, like back in 2017, like I said earlier, you kind of started getting to that 14 plus grade, and I read that you were in like a plateau previous to that. Is there anything you did specific to like break through your plateaus?
I've been getting this question a lot. Like I've had really steady progress in my climbing for a long time now, and people are sort of curious what the secret sauce is, but I'm not sure what it is, to be honest. I think that a lot of my growth in climbing comes from external factors that aren't related to climbing, like not directly related to climbing, like who I'm going on trips with and how I'm learning from them and expanding the number of moves that I'm doing and the number of places that I'm going, just like more climbing styles, exposing myself to more opportunities to learn in climbing. And I think that's where a lot of my improvement comes from, not necessarily the things that I'm doing in the gym.
Can you give like some examples, maybe?
So when I was younger, I climbed at the Red River Gorge pretty much exclusively just because it was convenient and local. And I didn't always have a driver's license when I was younger. Coming from Chicago, that's where everyone went. And I think I reached a plateau within that area because I wasn't exposing myself to anything new. I wasn't trying new styles of climbs, longer, shorter, harder, easier. I wasn't expanding my technique in any way because the style there is so specific. And I think when I started going to other places like other places in Colorado, maybe American Fork in Utah, that's where I started seeing more growth within my climbing.
So like the diversity and like rock types.
Expanding your repertoire of moves, your repertoire of rock types, styles, techniques that you may need. Rifle is also specific in that you need a lot of knee bars. Smith rock is specific in that it's like very technical face climbing, and just being able to try all of those things and learn, I think, is where you see a lot of growth in your climbing.
I think that's really interesting. And easier said than done as well. But I think like you're someone who's able to kind of like perform at multiple disciplines like within the same little time period. I find for me like I kind of have like a similar-ish history where like I did a lot of sport climbing in my earlier years, and then I moved to Squamish and got really into bouldering. But I can find it hard to like strike a balance between the two. So I'm wondering if you could talk about like how you're able to do that so well.
Honestly, I surprised myself with how well I bouldered in Magic Wood. Coming into that trip, I had been pretty much exclusively sport climbing because I had like a little project here at home that was sport climbing. But I think, like we were speaking about earlier, training my weaknesses, which is power, more bouldery sequences, I'm able to kind of keep both levels up because I'm working on my bouldering while training for sport climbing, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, totally.
It's very specific to me.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, speaking of those weaknesses, I do have a question. Where does the nickname Big Mick come from?
Oh my God. So Big Mick came from when I was younger. I've always been a smaller climber, but like the people in my home gym growing up said that I climb big. So I'm small, but I climb big. So they call me Big Mick. But now all my closest friends just call me Mick. They leave the big
Okay.
out.
And just put that in perspective, like how tall are you?
I'm 5'1", which I think is 154, 155 centimeters.
And you have like a plus ape index,
It's
or
like plus maybe 3 inches. Yeah.
oh, nice. That's
Yeah.
helpful for
Yeah. It
sure.
gets me to 5'4" that way.
Do you have any advice for climbers who maybe feel like their height or their reach is kind of like a hindrance in their climbing?
I think definitely there are times where height really does play a factor, but those are few and far between. I think mainly the solution is to get stronger. It might be harder for you if you're small, but you can still do it. And I think it's more overcoming that mindset of I'm too small to do this and sort of replacing it with I just need to try a little bit harder, but it's going to be really cool when I can figure out this move, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's so much to be said for that. I know a lot of short climbers and they just don't let it get in their way, right? And then they just become so much stronger because of it. Because like say like a V6 for a short climber, it might feel like V8 for a big climber. So they're pulling much harder moves, right?
Big people, small people, there's so many different things that might affect our climbing. But I think that's one of the really cool things about our sport is that people of all body types can try the same climb and be successful.
I hope that the shorter climbers out there are looking up to you for that as well. Now,
Or they're not looking up to me, they're looking
well,
eye
yeah, they're looking eye to eye. That's right.
to eye. I see
Um,
you.
who did you look up to, or yeah, look up to when you were a kid? And who did you try to emulate when you were coming up?
I was really fortunate to grow up climbing with Isabel Faust, who is one of the world's best boulders. If you guys don't know who she is, look her up. And I think she was my role model in a lot of ways, even though we were peers, because she was so driven, so independent, and just had, and still has, really ambitious goals in climbing. And I think it pushed me to dream bigger in a lot of ways and still does.
So that was like a teammate or something?
Yeah, yeah, we were on the same competitive climbing team growing up in Chicago.
I was totally expecting you to say like, someone like Lynn Hill or something like that.
I think the most influential people in my life are the people that I know and that I'm close with.
Mm.
I think I look up to a lot of my friends, almost all of them actually, and I think I surround myself with people who push me, which I really love.
So yeah, getting to Dreamcatcher now. I know we mentioned it a few times, and I wanted to get through all the other stuff first. So although not everyone is projecting like 14 plus, I think that like hearing about your process can be really helpful, whether someone's project is 5'11, 5'12, 5'13, 5'14, whatever. So I was wondering if you could kind of like take us through your process on Dreamcatcher, like right from start to finish.
So I first went to Squamish a few years ago. I can't remember if it was 2018 or 19 or 17. And Dreamcatcher was unfortunately like a little bit wet and seepy,
Oh,
but I
classic
was still,
Squamish.
I know, which was a great introduction. It really set me up. But I was able to try all the moves at least, which gave me an idea of what the route was all about and what to expect. So I instead focused my time mainly on sampling all the boulders in the area
Hmm.
and coming back, which was always the plan. I felt like I could train really specifically for Dreamcatcher, which is exactly what I did. I trained dynamic movement towards the right. I trained heel hooks. There's like a really crimpy crook section at the top. So I got my finger strength up as much as I could and did a lot of campusing, things like that. And when I returned to Squamish, I was just really well prepared. Basically, I went straight from Salt Lake to Squamish. We drove, so that's like 18 hours or something. Straight, I know, went straight to Dreamcatcher and like did the slab and was giving pretty much red point goes from day one back on it, which was like really cool. It's the first time that I've ever showed up at a project that prepared and it felt good. And then from there, it was just fine tuning the beta and giving goes, trying to learn from every attempt. And I think it only took me 5 days. So the process was relatively short
Wow.
lived, which thankfully, because when you get into those longer project modes, it can be pretty stressful, I think.
Hmm.
So I was lucky enough to just get a high point almost every time that I was on it until I did it.
Wow, that's amazing. Good for you. That's so cool. Yeah, and doing it in 5 days is amazing too. Like I think when you get into those long projects, like it can almost just feel like a relief when you finish. But when you're fighting for the end, it just feels really special, right? Not that you're not fighting for the end when you're like trying it over the long term, but yeah, that's really cool. So you tried the slab first? I've heard a lot of people like they'll just try like the rail section first, and then they'll kind of just like force the slab or something like that.
Well, I had, because I had been there before, I had like an old video, so I already like kind of knew
Mm.
my data from that. And I think the slab, I don't do the jump like at the top.
Oh, I was gonna ask that. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
I figured out this like static way. So for me, it definitely wasn't the most challenging part. I think that part suits me better than the like crazy cut
Yeah.
loose section.
Are you yeah, like obviously there's a Chris Sharma route. Necessary Evil is Chris Sharma route. Are you looking to follow Chris Sharma in on any other climbs?
Wouldn't that be cool if I could just do
Yeah.
everything he's done?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, nothing in particular right now, but I think like he was obviously a pioneer in our sport, so it's hard to avoid climbs that he's
Yeah.
done.
That's a
Like,
good point. Yeah.
but yeah, he was actually in Petzl or at the Petzl rock trip, and we were
Oh,
talking about
cool.
how crazy it was that he did Dreamcatcher and moccasins.
Yeah.
That's absolutely insane. But yeah, we were laughing about that.
Yeah. Not only Dreamcatcher, tons of the hard boulders around here that were on the rampage video he did in moccasins. It's just
Yeah,
like that's next level. Like you may as well be campusing them, I feel like.
this is what he did.
So it only took you 5 days. I was gonna ask how many days on slash off you were doing, but it seems like maybe it was just one on, one off for 3 sessions or something like
Yeah.
that.
Well, I think in Squamish you kind of have to go based on the weather, right? So you
Hmm.
how it is. And I think I can't remember how many days on and off I was. I think it was raining while I was there a little bit. So that
Yeah, it's always raining here. It seems like. Yeah, and you managed to do black hole as well. Like, is that kind of common for you to try to like do some bouldering while you're sport climbing just to keep up that power?
I think that Squamish is unique in that the boulders are right there,
Yeah.
what the sport climbing is. So typically no, just because you don't have that opportunity. But when in Squamish, it's hard to resist, right?
What was it that made you start to give it proper red point goes? But I guess you were just high pointing every time. Like, were you just kind of like going for it, like straight off?
Yeah, well, it's when you get through the slab from the bottom, you might as well just keep going, right?
Yeah.
So that's what ended up happening. I would like get through the slab and be on the rail and just try to climb the rail the whole way.
Yeah. What? So you said it rained a little bit while you were here. Did were any of the holds wet while you were here? Like, it probably dried out pretty good last summer with it being so hot, but
Yeah, there was one day where it was just like rain down the whole thing. The
yeah.
rail was wet, and I was like, "Oh no, this just maybe ruined my chances." But it ended up being super windy, and it.
Oh, nice.
I think I did it the next day actually. So no,
Awesome.
no tragic rain that time around.
Right. You didn't have to bring a leaf blower up with you to like dry the holds out.
No, but the first year that I was there when it was seeping, people were like somebody shoved like
Ah.
tissues in there, which was like kind of annoying because they were just stuck.
Yeah. That's actually pretty common around here. Like I've seen people like tape toilet paper like above the crux hold of a boulder just to like because it'll be seeping onto the crux hold or something.
Yeah, we need to figure out a better system, I think.
Yeah. I wonder what we could do. Tarp stuff.
Yeah,
That's not that nice though. Are you planning on coming back to Squamish?
yeah, too. I love it up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Um,
cool.
there's some hard boulders I'd like to do. So yeah,
Oh yeah. Like what?
reckoning that would be
Oh
sick.
yeah, sick. Like are you gonna come back this year or next year or
See, it's definitely on the radar, but I'm next month I'm gonna spend some time in Colorado, so I kind of have to see where I can squeeze it in.
what do you got planned for Colorado?
I was gonna say, especially with gas prices, the way
Oh yeah, I know. What the heck, eh?
that 18-hour drive is a lot more expensive than it used to be.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm staying, my little sister goes to school in Boulder, so I'm gonna go see her cute little
Oh, cool.
college apartment, and then climb with Nina, Alex, and Isabel.
In like Rocky Mountain National Park or something.
Yeah, all around. We'll see.
Yeah. All right, I get it. I get it. You want to keep it secret.
It's more of a casual trip.
Right, yeah. Well, and it's like you said earlier, you like to kind of just let things brew.
Put a lot of pressure on myself as it is, so I try to limit it.
How do you kind of combat that pressure? Like, because I'm sure you know, but like I found that when you don't really care, like climbing almost comes easier.
A little bit how we were speaking earlier, it's who you surround
Right.
yourself with, and just having that support system is key. It can be really hard to be in your own head, so having people that like really support you and encourage you, I think.
So I've kind of already tried to ask this, but Michaela, you're an unstoppable force right now. What is next for Michaela Kiersch?
Um, Next, you'll have to wait and see. Now,
All right.
I think just Colorado, and right now I'm in the midst of trying to figure out my next big trip. So I don't know what's next right now.
I gotta ask this as well. Obviously, V15, 15A is the next for you.
That would be Um, yeah, I mean, I'd love to send 515 or V15.
Do you have any on your radar or anything like that?
Nothing specific right now, but there's many beautiful 515s and B15s out there that I know of. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
one of those.
One got established in Squamish here last summer, so
There we go.
maybe try that out. There you go. Cool. Yeah, well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you so much.